Look at the West Point class photos from the early 20th century. You'll see faces that would shape World War II. Eisenhower, the politician; Bradley, the schoolteacher; Patton, the aristocrat. Polished, disciplined, destined for greatness, but there was someone else walking those gray stone halls, someone who didn't fit, a man who drank too much, fought too hard, and cared more about horses than regulations. His name, Terry de la Mesa Allen. And long before the Germans would learn to fear him as Terrible Terry, the United States Army tried desperately to destroy him. Terry Allen was born for war. His father, a colonel; his mother, daughter of a Spanish officer. Gunpowder ran through his veins, but West Point didn't care about bloodlines, it cared about grades. And in 1912, Terry Allen was failing. He battled a severe stutter that turned every recitation into a nightmare, while other cadets studied Clausewitz. Allen was throwing punches behind the barracks. He failed mathematics. He failed ordnance. Finally, the academy had enough. Sophomore year, the commandant's office. Pack your bags, cadet. Discharged. Flunked out. A failure. For 99% of men, that would be the end. They'd go home, sell insurance, and dream of what could have been. But Terry Allen wasn't like other men. He refused to accept the Army's rejection. He enrolled at Catholic University, earned his degree, and clawed his way back into the military through a competitive exam. Second lieutenant, cavalry. He'd entered through the back door with a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. Then came 1918. The Great War. While the perfect officers sat in staff tents planning maneuvers, Captain Terry Allen was in the mud. The Meuse-Argonne offensive. Leading a battalion of the 90th Division from the front. This is where the West Point rebel finally found his classroom. The lesson came on a foggy morning during a brutal assault on German lines. Allen was leading from the front, a habit that would later terrify his superiors when a German bullet smashed into his face. The round tore through his jaw, ripped out several teeth. Blood poured down his uniform. His face was destroyed. His men froze, waiting for him to collapse, waiting for the medic. Any normal officer would have been evacuated immediately. Any normal officer would have taken that $1 million wound and gone home to safety. Terry Allen spat out a mouthful of blood and broken teeth. His jaw was hanging loose. He couldn't speak clearly, but he didn't retreat, according to legend. He wrapped a bandage around his head to hold his jaw together, pulled out his pistol, and simply waved his arm forward. He refused evacuation until the objective was taken, until his men were dug in safe. For days, he commanded through hand signals and muffled growls, leading his battalion through the hellscape of the Argonne Forest. When the armistice was signed, the West Point failure had a silver star pinned to his chest and a jagged scar carved across his face. The Army realized they'd made a terrible mistake. Terry Allen wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a politician. He was something far more dangerous, far more valuable. He was a pure warrior. But as the guns of World War I fell silent, a new problem emerged. The rebel had proven he could fight. But could he survive the peace? The generals in Washington wanted obedient officers. What they had in Terry Allen was a ticking time bomb waiting for the next war. Operation Torch. The United States Army waded ashore green and tested, terrified of making mistakes. Young soldiers clutched their training manuals like Bibles, their eyes wide with fear. But among this sea of uncertainty, there was one anomaly, one unit that didn't act like a military formation. It acted like a pirate crew. This was the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, and it was built in the exact image of its commander, Terry de la Mesa Allen. To understand the 1st Division under Allen, you must understand what he hated. Terry Allen despised parade ground soldiers. He had no patience for polished boots, tight neckties, or marching in perfect formation. While generals like George Patton believed strict uniform discipline created good soldiers, Allen believed something else entirely. Spirit and aggression created survivors. He encouraged a culture that horrified the high command. His men, the men of the Big Red One, stopped shaving. They wore their tunics unbuttoned. They discarded heavy, useless regulation gear and replaced it with extra ammunition and captured German weapons. They walked with a swagger that bordered on arrogance to British allies and rear echelon American MPs. They looked like armed vagrants. The press began calling them Allen's gangsters. And Allen, he loved it. He didn't just tolerate this behavior. He cultivated it. He told his officers, "I don't give a damn if they salute me. I care if they kill Germans." He was building a tribal identity. He wanted his men to feel superior to everyone on the superior to the British, superior to other American units, and especially superior to Rommel's Afrika Korps. The result was a unit that was practically unmanageable when it wasn't fighting. In the rear areas of Oran and Algiers, the 1st Division was a nightmare for military police. They started brawls in bars. They hijacked supply trucks for better food. They mocked officers from other divisions who had clean uniforms. General Omar Bradley, a man who viewed war as a precise science, looked at Allen's division with disgust. He saw a mob out of control. But then came the fighting. When disaster struck at Kasserine Pass, where the inexperienced American army was crushed by Rommel's panzers, it was Allen's gangsters who helped stem the tide, while other units broke and ran. The 1st Division dug in. They fought with savage personal hatred that shocked the Germans. Allen had taught them one lesson: the only way to survive was to be more aggressive than the enemy. He spent his time in the front lines, not in a command tent. He drank with his enlisted men. He ignored orders from headquarters if he thought they'd get his boys killed needlessly. There's a famous story that captures Allen's philosophy perfectly. During a review, a staff officer from headquarters complained that the 1st Division's and their lines were crooked. Allen took a drag from his cigarette, looked at the pristine officer, and growled, "My men can't march, but they don't die. And they don't surrender." He had forged the Big Red One into the most effective killing machine in the American arsenal. But in doing so, he'd made Patton and Bradley were watching the gangster general with growing resentment. They saw a man becoming bigger than the army itself, a man whose loyalty was only to his soldiers, not to the chain of command. They needed his fighters, but they were already plotting to destroy the man who created them. Allen had built a brotherhood of war, but he was about to learn that politics is the deadliest battlefield of all. July 1943, Sicily. The legend of Terry Allen had reached its boiling point. Operation Husky was underway, and the Big Red One was once again at the tip of the spear. But as Allen pushed his men forward, a different kind of war was brewing behind the lines. While the Germans feared Allen's tactical brilliance, the American High Command began to fear his independence. To Generals Patton and Bradley, Terry Allen was becoming dangerous. Not because he was incompetent, on the contrary, he was winning every battle he fought, but because he was creating a private army within the United States Army. Bradley, the schoolmaster general, looked at the 1st Division and saw a unit that felt more loyalty to terrible Terry than to the flag itself. The soldiers of the Big Red One spoke of themselves as a separate entity. They believed they were winning the war single-handedly. They looked down on other divisions. Bradley blamed this arrogance directly on Allen. The tension exploded at the Battle of Troina. Troina was the highest town in Sicily, a medieval fortress perched on the Granite Grenadier Division. It was the toughest nut the Allies had to crack in the entire campaign. For 6 days, the 1st Division threw themselves against that rock. The heat was unbearable. German artillery was relentless. It was a meat grinder. Patton, impatient for glory, demanded results. He threatened to sack commanders if the town wasn't taken immediately. But Allen ignored the bluster. He knew that rushing up that mountain would be suicide. Instead, he orchestrated a masterclass of combined arms warfare, massive airstrikes, coordinated artillery that turned the mountain into a volcano. He maneuvered his infantry inch by bloody inch, grinding the Germans down until they finally broke. August 6th, the Big Red One entered the ruins of Troina, a magnificent victory. Terry Allen had delivered the prize that broke the German line in Sicily. He expected a commendation. Instead, he got a firing squad. Less than 24 hours after the victory, Omar Bradley summoned Allen to his headquarters. The meeting was short, cold, brutal. Bradley told Allen he was being relieved of command. The official reason: combat fatigue. They claimed Allen was too tired to lead, that the war had worn him down. It was a lie, and Allen knew it. He stood there, the dust of Troina still on his uniform, his eyes blazing. Hell, he said, I'm not tired. I'm just getting started. But the decision was final. The army wanted their division back. They wanted to break the cult of personality. They fired not only Allen but also his assistant commander, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the son of the former president. The gangster generals were out. The scene of Allen's departure is one of the most emotional moments in American military history. Command tent for the last time, word spread through the ranks like wildfire. They fired the old men, thousands of soldiers, men who had marched through hell for him. Men who refused to salute other officers but would die for Terry Allen line, the dusty Sicilian. They just watched in stunned silence. Many were openly weeping. Allen walked down the line, tears streaming down his own face, shaking hands with the grunts. The sergeants, he had the muddy greatest fighting force in the European theater. And now he was being stripped of it because he loved them too much. As his jeep drove away, leaving the big red one behind. It felt like the end of the story. The Maverick had been broken. The generals had won. Terry Allen was sent back to the United States, effectively exiled, destined to be a footnote in the history books. But Patton and Bradley forgot one thing, the lesson from West Point 30 years earlier. You can knock Terry Allen down, but you can never keep him down. The Timberwolf was glorious year. Terry Allen had been the most famous division commander in the American Army. Then, abruptly, he became a ghost after his firing in Sicily. Allen was shipped back to the United States, to the newspapers. It was a rotation, but everyone in the military knew the truth. Allen was in exile. El Paso, Texas, a training camp, a graveyard for careers. The Pentagon expected him to fade away, to retire quietly and play polo while the proper generals finished the war in Europe. But Terry, he stewed. Allen didn't fade. He paced his office like a caged tiger. He bombarded Washington with letters demanding a new command, and miraculously, the army listened. The war in Europe was grinding into a bloody stalemate. The high command realized a hard truth. They had plenty of managers, but they were running low on fighters. Late 1943, Allen was given the impossible, a second chance, the 104th Infantry Division, the Timberwolves, but this wasn't the big red one. The 1st Division had been composed of rough, hard-drinking regulars. The 104th was filled with draftees, young kids, college students, farm boys who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. Allen looked at these fresh faces and decided to try something radical. He wasn't just going to train them. He was going to rewire their biology. Allen had spent his exile analyzing the battlefield. He realized American troops were getting slaughtered because they fought on the enemy's terms. They attacked during the day when German artillery spotters could see them. When the sun went down, the American army stopped, dug in, and slept. Allen decided to flip the script. He told his new division, "The night is not a cloak for the enemy. It is a cloak for us." He turned the Timberwolves into creatures of darkness. The training was brutal and revolutionary. The entire division shifted schedules. They slept during the day and trained at night. They learned to navigate forests in pitch blackness without flashlights. They learned to dismantle and reassemble rifles by touch alone. They conducted live-fire exercises in the dark with machine gun bullets screaming overhead. Allen's doctrine was simple but terrifying. Attack without artillery. Standard doctrine was to blast targets with cannons before attacking, but that warned the Germans you were coming. Allen taught the Timberwolves to creep forward in total silence under cover of darkness and be inside German foxholes with bayonets and grenades before the enemy even woke up. For months, he drove them relentlessly. His motto, "Nothing in hell must stop the Timberwolves." September 1944, the 104th landed in France. By late 1944, the German High Command believed they had the Americans figured out. Predictable. They loved artillery. They loved air support. They loved daylight. When the sun went down, the battlefield went silent. Terry Allen and the 104th Infantry Division shattered that sense of safety. As the Timberwolves ground into the Rhineland, the Germans realized they were facing a new breed of enemy. Reports filtered back to German headquarters of night phantoms. Defending units would sleep in secure bunkers surrounded by minefields only to wake up with a knife at their throat. The Timberwolves struck in total silence. They moved like shadows. They didn't fire rifles. They used grenades and bayonets. For the German soldier, this was psychological torture. The night their sanctuary became a place of terror. One captured German officer told his interrogator, "We know when other divisions are coming. The ground shakes, but you are just suddenly there." By spring 1945. The 104th was spearheading the Lie drive into the heart of the Reich. They took the city of Halle in a bitter 5-day battle. Then they made history. The 104th became one of the first American units to link up with the Soviet army at the Mulde River. In the ruins of a defeated nation, the Timberwolves shook hands with the Red Army. The symbolic end of the Third Reich. For Terry Allen, standing on the banks of the Mulde was ultimate vindication. 2 years earlier, he'd been fired, humiliated, sent home as a burned-out case. Now he stood deep in enemy territory, commanding a division that terrified the Wehrmacht. Having led them through 195 consecutive days of combat, he never got the 4th star. He never got Patton's press coverage or Eisenhower's political power. He remained a major general until retirement, but to the men of the Big Red One and the Timberwolves, rank didn't matter. Terry Allen was the only general in World War II to build the separate divisions into elite fighting forces. He proved you didn't need to be a polished diplomat to win wars. You needed to be a fighter. He was the most badass American general because he didn't fight for the history books. He fought for the men standing next to him in the dark. And in the end, that's why the Germans feared him, and why his soldiers loved him.